All right, ladies and gentlemen. So I just spent like an hour recording a video, and then I decided I might be able to do it in like 20 minutes instead. Like you know me. Like sometimes I ramble. So I've been debating as to whether or not I should even make this video. But then Sky from the Comeback Kids basically started talking about like PvP. How they're planning on putting like a flat PvP damage reduction, probably around about 20%. So it'll give you like a 25% effective increase in HP and a 25% effective increase in healing. But interestingly, in the comments, if you actually read the comments and stuff, Blizzard's a little bit nervous about putting this in the game. And I want to talk about why they might be nervous. And I'm also going to talk about, and I'm going to title this video, I think, why I don't want to see why this is really bad for certain classes, okay? So there's good ways to do this, and there's bad ways to do this. And I commented on the video, and as near as I can tell, or is the best thing that Blizzard can do for Season of Discovery is they should put a flat percentage damage for PV reduction in the game for PvP. We'll just assume 20%. For the sake of argument, but then that'll very quickly tell them which spells are overperforming and which spells are underperforming. And you can see this very clearly like in how the burst meta changes, right? So if shamans are still one-shotting people with a Kamehameha due to how powerful Lava Burst is, despite the fact that there's a 25% damage or 20% damage reduction in the game, or 20% effective increase in HP, you could very easily go in and say that Lava Burst will only do 80% of its damage in PvP, done and dusted. Some of the classic WoW spells will probably need to get buffed if they're not buffed already. Moonfire comes to mind, for example, and yada yada yada. So it should be very easy to tell which spells are still overpowered despite the damage reduction, and which ones are underpowered, and then to specifically tweak it from there. I would still prefer to see my proposal of it being a rune system of percent-based damage reduction, but that's just me. And this will be pretty easy on the devs. However, their nervousness after thinking about it for a while is 100% justified. And it's going to take me a little while to explain its justification. Gear Planner, Paladin, Dwarf. Okay, it's going to take me a little bit of a moment to explain the justification here, okay? So, percent-based damage reduction in PvP hits certain classes differently than it hits other classes. More specifically, certain classes that can heal themselves, specifically, double dip from a mechanic such as this, okay? So, for example, if I give warriors, rogues, hunters, classes that cannot heal themselves, a 25% or a 20% damage reduction, I've effectively increased their HP by 25%, and I've done nothing else for them, okay? They are literally 25% harder to kill than they used to be. Thank you very much, all right? However, you start giving those abilities to classes that can heal themselves. So we're talking Druid. We're talking Priest. We are talking Shaman and Paladin. I'm going to leave Mage out of the equation temporarily because I don't know enough Mage to talk about them. They effectively double dip from a durability reduction of this nature, right? It sounds obvious when you start talking about it, right? Because suddenly that healer is going to live 25% longer than he did before, which means he's going to be healing himself 20%, or he's going to be healing himself for 25% more than that, and then suddenly you have to punch through that again. So very quickly, that 20% damage reduction, you can actually put a mathematical formula behind this very simply. That 20% damage reduction that's supposed to increase his life by 25% is going to instead increase his total survivability by about a 33% or somewhere around there. This is even worse if a sizable portion of their healing is coming from HOTS. Okay? So let's take Paladin, for example. A Paladin and Shaman versus Druid and Shadow and Priest as it stands, right? Both Druid and Priest have options to hard cast heals on themselves, but generally speaking, they're both classes that are going to dot you up, and then they effectively have HOTS that they can put on themselves, especially if they're building themselves correctly with their rune usages, right? So they get to run around dotting up people. They get to run around bitch slapping people with instant cast spells, which are basically no different than a dot, except they do their thing instantly, right? Like Star Surge is a dot on a 6-second cooldown. Thank you very much, right? Shadow Word Death is a dot on a 8-second or a 6-second cooldown. Thank you very much. Shock spells are short-range dots on 6-second cooldowns. You get the idea, right? But they can heal themselves and be hyper-mobile at the same time compared to Paladin and Shaman, who actually have to root their asses in place in order to heal themselves. They also effectively they have to sacrifice their DPS in order to heal themselves, if you're following me on this, right? So a Shaman cannot well DPS and heal themselves at the same time. Paladins cannot well DPS and heal themselves at the same time. This is an element of weakness that they have. So even though they are double dipping from a percent base damage reduction theoretically, they're nowhere near double dipping as much as a dot-based playstyle or an instant cast playstyle that also has HOTS and that can also hard cast heals in themselves, right? So for example, a Shadow Priest, literally imagine a Warlock that can dot you up and then at the same time put a bunch of HOTS on themselves, at the same time hard cast heals into themselves when things get really scary. And oh, by the way, I just described Shadow Priest, or basically Priest and Druid at that point. In Season of Discovery, I literally just described Priest and Druid. However, things get more interesting in Season of Discovery because Shamans, and I did make a Shaman PvP guide, Shamans can take runes that effectively give them a bunch of HOTS. So Shamans have the ability to transition into a more Druid and Priest playstyle, okay? Where they're hotting themselves and they're doing damage on the enemy and or they're healing themselves, and they're not just double dipping anymore. They're basically triple dipping from percent base damage reduction. Paladins, believe it or not, fall into the exact same category, but they don't fall into the exact same category until you hit level 60 specifically. And this is where I ended up spending the vast majority of my time in the previous attempt at this video, and why it took so long, so I'm going to try to briefly explain this. I'm going to try not to repeat myself here. So the reason for this is because, number one, there is no Paladin PvP build that is anywhere near remotely complete, missing talent points. So, for example, all Paladin builds, they're missing at most like 3 talent points. So, for example, at level 50, Holy Shock Paladin has Holy Shock and basically nothing else. At level 60, he has Holy Shock and Eye for an Eye. Reckoning Paladins basically have Reckoning and nothing else. They have Reckoning and they can heal in combat, or they have Reckoning and basically nothing else. Come level 60, they have Reckoning and the ability to heal in combat and Eye for an Eye. You get the idea. So basically what's happening for Paladin is at level 60, they gain something major that they've been missing. And for the vast majority of Paladins, it is Eye for an Eye specifically is what they're gaining. Like, let me just show you how this works here really fast. Yeah, 3 points, 1, 2, 1, 2. What's going on here? We still missing one? Yeah, okay. Boom. Okay, yeah, boom. Okay, cool. So you can see here, this is level 50. Oh, man. Okay, so I actually need to go talent calculator Paladin and do this. Try not to repeat myself here. Okay, okay, okay. All right, so you can see that we're going to set it to max level. I have 51 talent points. Put 2 points there, put 3 points here, put 4 points here, put 1 there, 2 points. With 17 points into the Retribution talent tree, I have 4 points left over. This is very easy. Very easily, I can pick up Holy Shock. Very easily, I can pick up Reckoning. I can even pick up Reckoning because it's take 25 points in there. And I'll show you what this looks like really fast here. And I can still have healing in combat. 1, 2, 3, 4. Kings. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I have 9 talent points left over. We'll put 5 here. We'll put 4 here. Using Improved Concentration Aura with his 50% pushback immunity, and then using Spiritual Focus, I could even strip out a point here and get Improved Hammer of Righteousness, or I could just put it here and have 100% spell pushback immunity. I now have Eye for an Eye, Reckoning, and the ability to heal myself in combat with whatever crazy rune selection I so desire, right? So all Paladin builds at level 60 get a massive bonus to their combat capability. So at level 50, I can be this like bad version of this, right? Like this is a level 50 build that has 4 points in Reckoning and then 2 points in Eye for an Eye, right? But that's nothing compared to suddenly the ability to heal myself in combat and having 5 out of 5 Reckoning and Eye for an Eye. It just doesn't compare. Basically what this means is the vast majority of Paladin builds are going to have an extra tool to play with at level 60, and they have an awful lot of reflect damage. Having Reckoning and the ability to heal in combat and Eye for an Eye, or Holy Shock and the ability to heal in combat and Eye for an Eye, gives Paladins the ability to heal themselves and essentially do damage to the enemy at the same time. Control Ret comes online for Retribution Paladin, where they put 31 points into the Ret tree, and they come down here and they specifically get Improved Hammer of Justice. And then the next thing you know, they're using like Goblin Mortar, a Tidal Charm Trinket, Repent, Grenade, and then a 35-second Hodge Stun, plus to basically keep themselves alive, jump on top of people, give them the business with all their cooldowns, and basically just beat you to death, right? Absolutely terrifying at level 60. So all Paladins at level 60 basically gain the ability to heal themselves and do damage to the enemy at the same time to a terrifying degree. This gets even worse when you start looking at, like, enemy spell pushback, which a lot of classes don't really have any immunities to in Classic World of Warcraft. The only one that really comes to mind is like in Classic WoW, they give spellcasters bubble shields to try to stop them from suffering spell pushback when they're doing offensive attacks, like mages, right? Like, how do they stop spell pushback when they take damage? Well, they have a bubble shield. How does priest stop spell pushback? They have a bubble shield. How does shaman stop spell pushback? Well, they have Eye of the Storm, but they have to put talent points in that, and then they have to be crit, which sucks. How does a druid deal with it? Well, they just put a bunch of dots on you, and they don't really hard cast spells, and they run around and they laugh. How does a warlock deal with it? Well, they just dot you up, and they just don't hard cast spells. If they have to hard cast spells, they can sack a void walker and put a bubble shield on themselves, right? But then you look at Paladin, and it's like, well, I'm going to take Holy Shock, and I'm going to take, Lasting Judgments, and then Exorcism, and then I'm going to take Purifying Power, and I'm going to start blasting you with over 200 DPS at range. Pow, 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 pow. Oh, you're trying to cast spells? That's cute. Pow. Make it cast a second longer. Well, next spell, cast a second longer. So they can do a bunch of annoying things, which basically means that the classes that are going to over-synergize with a percent-based damage reduction system are going to be Paladin at level 60 specifically, Shaman, Druid, and Priest, right? Every other class can't heal themselves in combat. Every other class does not have access to HOTS. All 4 of those classes have access to HOTS. Sacred Shield, you should 100% be taking. You should be taking Hand of Reckoning. Like this is Paladin. You're going to take Light's Grace. You're going to take Fanaticism. You're going to take Sheath of Light or Enlightened Judgments, one of the two. We'll just do Sheath of Light for shits and giggles. And you'll be taking Divine Storm or Seal of Martyrdom. And then you don't even have to take Exorcism anymore. You can take Rebuke. You can take Avenger's Shield. You can take Inspiration Exemplar. Yada, yada, yada. If you want to pelt people like crazy, then you can take Exorcism and Purifying Power. If you just want to, like, if you're a Reckoning Paladin, you'll be built a little bit differently. So a lot of people are playing Ret right now. Ret, you would take Purifying Power, Exorcism, Divine Storm, or Seal of Martyrdom, Sheath of Light, Fanaticism, Hand of Reckoning, and Sacred Shield. Why is this? Well, that's another thing we have to talk about. But long story short, these 4 classes are on my shit list for classes that are going to double or triple dip on any kind of percent-based damage reduction that you give them. What does this mean? It means that if you're going to give them a percent-based damage reduction, please, for the love of God, make it lower than everybody else's. I'm a Paladin main, and if I play any other thing besides a Paladin, it's a Druid, a Priest, or a Shaman. Usually it's a Shaman. And I'm looking at the situation and I'm like, okay, give them a 20% damage reduction, percent-based damage reduction. Give every other class that can't heal themselves a 30% base damage reduction. I'm not even joking. Make there be a distinct difference in the percent-based damage reduction between the classes that can heal themselves and the classes that cannot heal themselves, especially if those classes have the ability to simultaneously heal themselves and DPS on the enemies at the same time, which unfortunately all 4 of those classes do have that capability in Season of Discovery now. In Classic, it was only 2 of them, right? Shamans couldn't do that. Paladins couldn't do that. Paladins and Shamans both had to pick and choose between DPSing on the enemy or healing themselves. Paladins could kind of sort of do it with Reckoning and Eye for an Eye. Like, I'm healing, but I'm technically also doing damage. But they also have to close distance with the enemy and get into melee. So it kind of balanced out, right? It wasn't really a comparison between the two. But in Season of Discovery, you need to, like, batch these 4 classes kind of together and realize that any kind of percent-based damage reduction you throw their way is going to be absolutely terrifying on them. Any kind of HOTS that you give them is going to be absolutely terrifying. Any kind of dots that you give them is actually going to be terrifying. That's why I brought up the Enlightened Judgments, Exorcism, Purifying Power, because technically these are dots, right? You're just pelting the enemy at range with spells constantly. You're doing 200 DPS at like the 20 at the 30-yard range or beyond, and that's before you even factor in Holy Shock or Sheath of Light or anything stupid like that. Can't have Sheath of Light and Lasting Judgments, thank God. But these are basically dots, and these are basically HOTS. And these things are also basically dots. Eye for an Eye is a dot, and Reckoning is essentially a dot. And so you're just looking, and these things can heal, and you're just looking at classes that are basically, they're doing the same things, but they're doing them differently, and they're all going to triple dip on the percent-based damage reduction front. So yeah, so that's my takeaway here is be advised that the classes that can heal and do damage at the same time are nowhere near, need to have a lower percent-based damage reduction for PvP than the classes that can't. That either can't heal or can't dot up the enemy, right? So like take Warlock, for example. They can't really heal, but they can certainly dot up people. What kind of damage reduction would they have? Well, technically, they can heal. Right? By the time you get done calculating what double Void Walker Sac does, by the time you get done calculating what a, Spirt Link does, by the time you get done calculating what their runes do for them, with the extra, like, life drain stuff and all that, you might as well throw them in there as well, now that I'm thinking about it, right? So they're going to double dip from a percent-based damage production as well. So I guess it's specifically rogues and warriors and, yeah. rogues, warriors, and mages, possibly, and, damn it, hunters. Yeah. That are going to need a 30% damage reduction if everyone else has a 20% damage reduction. If everybody else has a 25% damage reduction, then they're going to need a 35% damage reduction. You get where we're going with this, right? They're going to need a much larger percent-based damage reduction because they're not double dipping with it to anywhere near a degree. I just want to point out that Paladin needs to be thrown into that mix 110,000%. This also goes with the runes, so let's talk Paladin specifically here. If the new rune selection comes down, and you're giving Paladins a percent-based damage reduction, you're doing it wrong. Please don't. If you want to give them wings, that's perfectly fine. If you want to give them a bunch of more damage and the extra runes that you're giving them at level 60, that's also perfectly fine. But if you're giving them something like Argent Defender, just realize that Paladin's not going to be the same animal at 60 that it is at level 50, that it's been at level 40, that it's been at level 20. She's a completely different animal at level 60 once she gets all of her runes on board. You need to throw her in to the same category as all the other classes that are causing problems. Druids, priests, warlocks, shamans, right? They're going to be an issue. Damage is not a problem with them whatsoever because Paladins are technically damage capped. And they keep buffing Paladin abilities so that they're technically damage capped. What do I mean by this? I mean that with a decent two-handed weapon and being butt naked, they have no problem whatsoever, even without runes. They're going to have no problem whatsoever. Like literally, if you just give them like Divine Storm and Sheath of Light and Fanaticism, like these, and Exorcism, and then possibly Purifying Power, like these runes right here, they're very quickly hit their damage cap, which means butt naked with a two-handed weapon. I define damage cap for a Paladin being butt naked with a two-handed weapon is anything surviving me. Is anything surviving a wreck bomb? Okay, not really. Is anything surviving a wreck bomb plus a little bit of time on target? Not really. Is anybody surviving the attentions of a repenting, title charming, goblin mortaring, grenading, 35-second cooldown Hammer of Justice, deep rep Paladin? The answer is no. So very quickly you're like, well, I don't need any more DPS from my runes. I don't really need any more DPS from my gear. How do I build this Paladin to be as durable as I possibly can be? And that is... So if you give us more damage in our runes, it's not going to do anything because we've already hit the damage cap. All it really means, just don't give us any more percent-based damage reduction. If you're putting an Argent Defender at level 60, dear God, Paladins are just going to kill everybody. If you give us another hot, dear God, Paladins are going to kill everybody. If you give us another effective dot, dear God, Paladins are going to kill everybody. It's not the same animal at level 60. Again, I'm starting to repeat myself. I'll just leave it at that. As it stands, our BIS PvP gear and runes is literally just to do something like this. So if you're a rep Paladin, you literally take like these runes right here: Exorcism, Purifying Power, Sacred Shield, Hand of Reckoning, Fanaticism, Sheath of Light. You'll kill anybody and everything in its dog. And that's like if you're wearing like tier 3 or if you're butt naked with a two-handed weapon. Like you have no bonus damage from your gear whatsoever. Doesn't matter. You're just going to cut people to pieces. Reckoning Paladins are going to take Seal of Martyrdom instead, and instead of Sheath of Light, they're going to take Enlightened Judgments, and then they're probably, rather than taking they might take Purifying Power, or they might take Light's Grace, one of those two. They're just going to kill everybody, and it really doesn't matter. The other thing that I wanted to talk about, and this video is getting a little long, is a weird phenomena I've noticed with the player base in World of Warcraft in general that is an issue for Blizzard. And this is kind of some high IQ stuff. I know this video is full of high IQ stuff, but it's going to get worse, okay? I've been making Paladin PvP guides for years. I've had no competition on that front whatsoever. mostly because nobody can do can do it better than me, so they just don't bother to challenge me, right? Yeah, and the guys who can do it better than me basically just hit me up on Discord and they're like, "Yo, Paladin, make a video about this." So it is what it is. And I can tell you right now that people usually the Paladin player base doesn't really watch my videos. So, for example, I know that 10% of the player base has traditionally been Paladin, and I'll make a PvP guide on the subject, basically to tell you, hey, 90% of Paladin is just wearing the proper gear. Just wear the proper gear, and in Season of Discovery, it's wear the proper gear and take the right runes. This is 90% of Paladin. That's all they are. Just wear the right gear, and because we're auto attack Andes, basically, right? So there is no learn to play better for Paladin. It's literally just wear the right gear and then use your trinkets and grenades in the right order. Heal it. There's nothing to it, right? It's the same way in Season of Discovery. What I've noticed about the Paladin player base, however, is that they don't look at guides, and if given the option, they will always gear their characters to do as much damage as they possibly can do. Now, Savix continues to do this, and he's a prime example of this phenomena. So I'm going to bring up Savix again here. So back in Phase 2, I made PvP guides for Paladin, and then I would watch what Savix would be doing with his PvP stuff. And Savix was missing something stupid like 38% life or like 43% life or something insane like that. Meaning that a properly geared Paladin would have 43% more hit points than Savix had in Phase 2. Because I understand the concept of being HP capped, if that makes any sense. I don't need any more damage, just need more durability, so let's gear for durability, and yada, yada, yada. Now, this is Phase 3, and we're going to check up on our boy Savix here. So, our boy Savix is in a battleground with no buffs whatsoever. He's got Sacred Shield on him, but that's not his Sacred Shield. I know for a fact he has Art of War on this Paladin. That's his pocket healer, like adorable. Pocket healer won't help you in Season of Discovery. You're just going to explode. That's not his Sacred Shield. I'm fairly certain. You can see he doesn't even have it on his bars. Oh, yeah, I'm looking for it. No Sacred Shield on his bars. And I watched the combat. He had Art of War for sure. But you can see he has 4,012 HP in a battleground, which means I know exactly what gear he's wearing. I do believe this is back when the battleground still has a 30% HP buff, which means our boy is in a battleground with 30%, the 30% HP buff. And then earlier on, he was out dueling, like playtesting stuff. And you can see his HP is 2,800, and yeah, there's no HP here. So let's just look at it really fast. I'm trying to explain this formula, but we're just using Savix as an example here. The TLDR here basically is that in retail World of Warcraft, Blizzard will give you the PvP gear and tell you to go, in no uncertain terms, that this is the PvP gear. There's no other gear to really PvP in. Go PvP in this PvP gear and you'll have a good time. That does not exist in classic World of Warcraft, right? And so we have a bunch of people, and this has always been this way, that they want to be able to put on a tier set, a full tier set from PvE or from PvP, and to go into PvP and to not just explode. That's what they want. But unfortunately, that's not the game they're playing. They're playing Classic WoW. And in Classic, and it gets worse, right? Because what they're doing is I need this. I need the gear planner. Paladin, Dwarf. Okay, yep. Let's do this thing. Okay. Right? They'll put on a full PvP set, but then any item, any free item that you give them to decide what they put on themselves will always be DPS focused. So they'll take 2 DPS focused rings. They'll take a DPS focused cloak. They will take a DPS focused neck piece. They'll take a DPS focused weapon. And then they'll step into a battleground and they'll realize that they have no HP whatsoever. You can see this Paladin here has gone the complete opposite route, right? I have both 16 stamina rings. I've got trinkets that have stamina and increasing, like, plus healing and a bunch of other effects. I have a sword with extremely thick boy stamina. I have 2 different PvP sets, right, to get access to the double 15% stamina bonus. Why is this? Because I've already identified as a Paladin that I have enough DPS to get the job done already. However I gear my Paladin, it needs to be as durable as possible. This is not what 90% of the player base think, and they do not watch guides. And unfortunately, Blizzard has to deal with this situation because they're going to go into the battlegrounds improperly geared, explode, and then bitch at Blizzard to do something about it. Meanwhile, if Blizzard actually caters to these guys and gives them a damage reduction or an HP bonus, a player like me is going to take that and gear properly and kill everybody with it without them being able to do anything about it, right? And I'm trying to showcase how bad this is momentarily. Okay, so Blizzard out. Okay, so Savix outside of combat has this much HP. Let's increase it by 30%. So clearly he's changed his gear out a little bit for when he's stepping in PvP. But as we can see, he probably only has like 3,000 HP, maybe 3,100 HP times 0.3 before he steps into the 3,100 HP before he steps into the battleground. Yeah, okay. So our boy here has 3,100 HP before he steps into a battleground, compared to my proposed build that has almost over 1,000 more HP. It's got almost 4,400 HP before it even steps in the battleground. But oh ho ho, it gets worse because he's picking the wrong runes, right? So if I go over to talents, you can see that I have Hand of Reckoning and Sacred Shield. I've got Purify, Hand of Reckoning and Sacred Shield, and of course I took Sheath of Light for this guy. Which means by the time I start hitting things, my spell power is going to spike quite extraordinarily, so that Sacred Shield will do its job. And we're not even going to factor in the hots from Sacred Shields. We're just going to look at standing HP and all that stuff in general. Okay, so Savix has 4,012 hit points in the battleground and nothing else going on. He has no Hand of Reckoning. He has Crusader Strike instead on his bars. He doesn't have Sacred Shield. He has Art of War instead because he wants to do damage. Clearly, he's not geared. Ugh. So anyways, I have more durability before we factor in anything, before I even step inside the HP. I got like 4, 3, 7, 5 with this gear. Okay, cool. Now I step into the battleground. What happens? I gain... Oh, actually, let's not step into the battleground. Let's factor in Hand of Reckoning. So Hand of Reckoning is about a 10% increase in your effective HP. She's basically King's, right? And that's if you were like AFK and someone was trying to kill you. She's much, much more valuable if you're able to react to it using, like, healing potions low life and getting your hots rolling at low life and using trinkets at low life, stunning the target and healing yourself while you've been, like, dipped down into the low life. She's way more valuable than just a 10% increase in HP. But for the purposes of not exploding in Season of Discovery, she's worth about 10% increase in HP. Okay, cool. So I don't have 4,000. This is how much HP I have. Now let's step into the battleground. Okay, so the 30%. Okay, cool. You can see we have over 50% more HP than Savix does. All right, that's cool. And we haven't even factored in Sacred Shield yet. And my build actually has Kings, believe it or not. So I would have to increase this by even more, but let's not do that. Let's just keep it civil. Let's say that I have Sheath of Light, and when Sheath of Light activates, my Sacred Shields are absorbing, like, 250, 300 damage. We're not even factoring in the hots and all that stuff yet, blah, 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 blah. We're just in a very quick number. I would have to add 300 to this number from, like, one Sacred Shield proc, and now I have to start asking myself a simple question from Sacred Shield of, at over 6,500 effective HP, do I think it's going to take longer than 6 seconds for the enemy to kill me? If the answer is yes, I have to add another Sacred Shield proc to that. So you can see that very quickly we're getting like 7,000 effective HP without breaking a sweat once we start factoring in blah, 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 blah. You can have like over 7,000 effective HP. I don't play Deep Ret Paladins. I play a Reckoning Paladin in PvP. Let's showcase that really fast here. Get the hell out of here. Get the hell out of here. Clear, reset, reset, reset. Okay, cool. So I do believe I put I don't need the damage, so we put that over there. I can't remember, but yeah, it's like 5, boom, 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 boom. Yeah, so you can see I pick up the kings. A 1, 2, strip a point out here if I recall correctly. Put 3 points in here, and then I do believe I've only got 5 points. Yeah, you got some extra points here, right? Are we done? What do I do with all these extra points? Lol. Yeah, I just play Reckoning Paladin, and I have healing in combat with Reckoning and Exorcism and all that stuff. Like, I don't care. It's just whatever. But your durability, basically, you're a really bad Holy Reckoning Paladin because you don't have Eye for an Eye and all that stuff. But yeah, so once you factor in kings, but a Deep Ret Paladin unfortunately can't have kings, but they have Repent, which is really amazing as well, right? I don't even want to know what this is like with kings. You're well over 7,000 effective HP. But Savix is dicking around, thinking he needs more DPS in a battleground with 4,000 hit points. And then these are the players that are going to go and try to tell Blizzard that they're exploding and the game is badly designed. Like, what in the balls? Like, bro, you're missing something stupid, like 80% of your HP. Like, what are we doing? So I feel bad for Blizzard on this subject because the only possible way around this is to actually give them very thick stamina PvP suits, or to make their tier set suits thick PvP suits to kind of break the whatchamacallits, the itemization rules of, or the stat prioritization rules of Classic World of Warcraft, to break it in favor of stamina, right? So in my estimate, like if I was a game dev with Blizzard, I would basically say that I'm buffing stamina, the value of stamina on all gearing, for tier sets specifically, especially for melee classes, and Paladin is a melee class. For casters, I would be increasing it by 30%, and for melee classes, I'd be increasing it by 50%. And let me give you an example of what I mean by that. So, if I was a Paladin and I had a piece of gear, or if there was a piece of gear that's itemization was 10 strength, 10 stamina, 10 intellect, right? If that piece of gear was for a caster class, rather than 10 intellect, I would literally just increase it by 30%. So it would say 13, my bad. I would increase the stamina by 30%. So rather than 10 stamina, it would say 13 stamina. And it would you just pick up 30% more stamina from your gear, which, believe it or not, would only translate into about a 25% overall increase of your stamina of your character by 30% for no reason whatsoever, right? I would say, I'll just snap my fingers and make it a reality. For melee classes, it wouldn't say plus 13 stamina. It would say a plus 15 stamina. So the piece of gear would normally be 10, 10, 10. Instead, now it's going to say 10 for every stat except for stamina. It magically has 50% more stamina. If you do not do this, what's going to happen is there's going to be a divide between players that know what the hell they're doing with their gearing and players that don't know what the hell they're doing with their gearing. Because they're going to put on their PvP gear, and then they're going to try to get as much damage as they possibly can from their rings, from their neck piece, from their back piece, and from whatever other piece of gear that you can possibly give them. And they're going to walk into PvP, and they're going to explode, and they're going to bitch at you. Because they're literally missing like 50% of their HP pools. It's it's a little disturbing and alarming to watch the player base do what it is that they do. And I don't think this is a Paladin only problem. I think it's across the board a problem with the player base, because properly geared PvPers are going to, in Season of Discovery, every last one of us are going to recognize the value of durability is far greater than the value of DPS in Season of Discovery. But that's only going to account for about 10% of the player base. And the vast majority of the rest of the player base is basically going to go full retard on DPS, and they're going to start blowing up, and they're going to wonder what the problem is. Yeah. So a little disturbing. I don't envy Blizzard on trying to balance all that. But I am fairly certain that there should be a difference between classes that can heal themselves and, effectively and do damage at the same time, which is everybody now. Like literally, it's every class except Hunter, possibly Mage, and Warrior. Everyone else needs to be treated like literally give whatever percent-based damage reduction you give to all the classes. It needs to be higher for Hunter, Warrior, and Rogue specifically. Ignore all the other classes. So that's one takeaway. The other takeaway is that if you do not force these highly intelligent human beings into having more stamina to having proper amounts of stamina on their gear, they're going to consistently gear in properly for PvP, and they're going to explode, and they're going to bitch at you. And it's just going to be a thing that happens. They do not look up guides. I don't know what to tell you. The only other possible way around it would be to hold dueling tournaments. Because in dueling tournaments, they're going to be properly geared, and they could at least show off how to properly gear and survive, right? So they might be like, oh my god, I'm always getting killed by rogues. Oh my god, I'm always getting killed by mages. Oh my god, I'm always getting killed by hunters, druids. I don't know how to fight them. And then you're going to watch a paladin or some other class or shaman in a dueling tournament come out there with like full tier 3 set with nothing but like plus healing gear on them and just absolutely crush and dominate everything. And maybe then people will get an inkling of why you should be wearing certain gear and taking certain runes for PvP. But as it stands, the player base is just, they are literally clinically retarded. Like, I don't know what to tell you. Anyways, I'm going to end the video here, and Deus Hope, boys.